It might sound like a Zen koan to you, but you get that experience, you know exactly what it means. The happiness has disappeared, and that is even more happy. And you go on through these jhanas as the mind gets more and more refined, more and more close to sunyata, to emptiness. It's going. As I said last night, with full cessation happens shortly afterwards. These are the jhanas. This is what happens. When you're in those states, you can't come out. The deeper you are in those jhanas, the longer they last. In those very, very deep jhanas, you last a long time. You can't come out. You're sitting there. It's not that you don't want to come out. It's the ability to come out. The ability to make a decision is completely gone. And because there's no craving, there's no decision-making possible. It is timeless. In those states that some people sit for days and they haven't got a clue that days have gone past. It doesn't have any meaning at all. Just like 5 seconds, 5 days. Absolutely still. People used to do this. I've told too many times the story of my disciple who went to hospital and had his... You all know that one, don't you? Put your hand up if you haven't heard about the disciple of mine who went to hospital because he was in jhana. Okay. Come on, you know that, don't you? You haven't heard it? Okay, here we go. One of my disciples, maybe about 40-year-old Australian man, sitting at home one day, he'd only usually do about 40 minutes of meditation a day. That was his limit. He decided, I think it was Saturday afternoon or something, he told his wife he's going into his bedroom to meditate. An hour and a half later, he still hadn't come out, so his wife checked him, went to check, see what he was doing. Because an hour and a half was strange for him. It only about 40 minutes he'd come out. When his wife went into the bedroom, she saw him still in meditation, being absolutely motionless. In fact, too still. She could not see his abdomen rising and falling at all. So she checked and couldn't see any sign of breath. So she rang the ambulance, 000 in Perth, emergency. Within 5 minutes, an ambulance screamed to a halt in front of their house. And the medics rushed out into the bedroom, took his pulse. When they could find no pulse, they put him straight into the stretcher and raced him to Sir Charles Gardner Hospital in Perth. In the ambulance, they could find no breathing, no sign of pulse. And that ambulance went through as many red traffic lights as it could. The sirens were wailing. This was an emergency. They rushed him into the ER room, and of course, the first thing they do in the ER room is put on the ECG to measure your heart rate. The monitor registered a flat line. Ding, 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 cardiac arrest, emergency. The machine wasn't lying. His heart was not moving at all. The next thing they did was the EEG to measure his brain activity. The monitor registered another flat line. Ding, 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 emergency, he was brain dead. It's my disciple who was brain dead and cardiac arrest. It's wonderful. And it was a very lucky thing that the doctor on duty was of Indian descent. Otherwise, he'd have just taken this guy down to the morgue. And when this guy had come out of his meditation, which he did later on, he probably really would have caused 2 deaths from the morgue workers who saw this corpse suddenly come out of meditation, because he wasn't dead. Now, for those of you who read the suttas, you'll find that when somebody asks, what's the difference between a dead person and somebody in deep meditation? The answer was that the body is still warm. And actually, this is what the doctor said. He said the bottom half from the waist down was as cold as you would expect a corpse. The top half was still warm. Even though there was no heartbeat, there was no brain activity. So the doctor decided to give this guy a chance. He'd had obviously his wife had said he got into this condition while he was meditating. He'd heard from his parents that yogis can suspend their life activities through meditation. He may have done this, so he decided to try and get the heart going again. How do you get the heart going? Again, in hospital, electric shocks. So he put these pads on his chest, zap, many, many times. Now I mention this because in those deep jhanas, you could have electric shocks put on your chest and you wouldn't know a thing about it. He never knew a thing about it. He told me afterwards. Many, many times. Electric shocks, still, flat line, ding, 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 cardiac arrest, emergency, brain dead, ding, 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 ding. You're only supposed to actually to be brain dead for sort of, I don't know how many minutes. Well, actually, not that. So if you're cardiac arrest for about more than 3 or 4 minutes, you have brain death or brain damage. He was many, 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 many minutes. I didn't actually say how much. I should actually ask him how long it was, so I can actually tell the story completely. But it was a long time until he decided to come out of his meditation. And the meditation finished. And he opened his eyes, and he was lying on his back, so he bent up. Where the heck am I? I was in my room, in bed. What's happened? As soon as he opened his eyes and came out of his meditation, the alarm stopped ringing. The brain activity was normal. The heart activity was absolutely normal. The doctor just checked him out. Nothing wrong with you. Go home. So he walked home. And I asked him about those experiences, because it's a great little story. Number one, what did you do? When I ask these questions, I know the answers, but I have to ask them so that I can tell these answers in my talks. He said, I really let go. He said, I really let go for the first time. Standard answer to that question. If any of you get into a deep meditation, I ask you, what did you do? I really let go, you'll tell me. You actually understand what that word truly means. Number 2 question is, what were you experiencing all that time? Could you hear the sirens of the ambulance? No. Could you feel those medics lift you up and put you in that trolley? No. Could you feel electric shocks? No. Were you unconscious? No. Were you mindful? Yes. Super mindful. But what was the content of your mindfulness? The most amazing bliss I've ever felt. That's what he felt. He was fully mindful of bliss. He was in a jhana, a deep one. That's what happens. Even my teacher, Ajahn Chah, the last 9 or 10 years of his life, he was in a coma. Sort of, because we knew exactly what he was up to. So every now and again he'd get into jhana. We knew this because on one occasion he stopped breathing. Yes, he used to stop breathing on many occasions. But on this particular occasion, one of my best friends, Ajahn Jhana, now at Wat Nana Chah, he was on duty there. Because what happened, as soon as Ajahn Chah had this problem, I think this excess fluid on the brain or something, had a stroke, all the monks met together. Our teacher, he's incapacitated, what should we do? And they all made the decision. All the monks together took a unanimous vote. We don't want sort of medical intervention. Let's just let it take its natural course. If he dies, he's given so many good teachings. We've got all the Dhamma. He's done his job. Let's let him go off into parinibbana. Leave him alone. Let him disappear. We've got so much out of him already. Out of compassion for our teacher, let's let him go. So they decided not to have any medical intervention. Just let him die. However, the king of Thailand heard that. And he sent a letter straight away. No, you will not. You will keep that monk alive. And now, unfortunately, when the king of Thailand says those things, even though that the monks are supposed to be higher than the king of Thailand, they thought, we better keep our teacher alive. So they kept him alive for many years. And the king of Thailand paid for the nurse, a male nurse on roster, 24 hours a day, at his bedside, for about 9 or 10 years. And it was the monks. We all volunteered to do little services, to be sort of the attendants. And this was just one night amongst many. Ajahn Chah stopped breathing. And the nurse wanted to get him breathing again. The monk said, look, leave him alone. He's just meditating. The nurse didn't believe that, because the nurse was trained in medicine. If you stop breathing, you'll soon become brain dead, and that would be the end of Ajahn Chah. The nurse knew that Ajahn Chah would one day die, but he did not want Ajahn Chah to die on his shift. So he wanted to get Ajahn Chah going. The monks argued with him. Leave him alone. No, I've got to do something. Leave him alone. No, I've got to do something. They came to a compromise. The nurse took blood samples every few minutes. Because the compromise was, look, as long as there's oxygen in the blood, it doesn't matter whether the heart's beating or not, or whether you're breathing or not. As long as there's oxygen in the blood, there will never be brain damage. So that's what they did. And they found out an amazing thing, that when you're in jhanas, you're not breathing, the heart's not pumping, but you maintain blood pressure, and there's always oxygen in the blood. The oxygen level never lessened for many hours. Fascinating piece of medical advice, medical research. So when you're actually in this jhana, you don't need to breathe. You're so still, you don't use oxygen. That's why the brain doesn't die. The oxygen is there for it, if it needs it. But it's so still it doesn't use anything at all. Why it doesn't need to breathe. That's the stillness of the jhanas. The Buddha said this is the way to Bodhi. Why? Why it's the way to enlightenment? Number one, first of all, as many people say, and it's very true, within those jhanas you cannot get any insight at all. Within the jhanas you don't get any insight. Because the mind can't move. To understand means you have to move. But the point is, you have so much data which you collect. You can't figure it all out at the time. But when you emerge from those jhanas, your mind is so powerful. And you have those experiences. It's those experiences after the jhana, when the mind moves and reflects upon them, that's where enlightenment usually happens. You have the amazing experience. You have the data. Like in a scientific experiment, you've got some really rare, very powerful, undeniable experiences. And after the jhana, your mind moves on it. And it starts to see things you never expected. You understand what anatta truly is. What dukkha is. What impermanence is. And I'll talk about those tomorrow. Without really having to, you don't make a decision, as the Buddha said in Anguttara Nikaya. You had such a powerful experience. Not only will you ask me, what the heck was that? You come to the interviews and say, Ajahn Brahm, help, I've just had this experience, what is it? You'd also be thinking about it yourself. You contemplate it. It's from those natural and avoidable contemplations you'll find out what's going on. Other little side effects, if you've got such a powerful mind, you get into those bliss states, you are not going to have many illnesses. Your mind is just too powerful. Amazing, just sort of illnesses which disappear with such deep meditation. You may even get some psychic powers. If you want to know what psychic powers are, the power of the mind from those states is huge. You understand where those psychic powers come from. Your mental energy is amazing. That's why sometimes people get scared. They don't know they can handle that sort of energy. But always know this. I said from the early stages, if you haven't got virtue, your nimitta is not strong enough to actually get that degree of power. So there is like a fail-safe mechanism there. If you want to try and use those powers for improper purposes, if you are immoral, then your nimitta just gets all dirty. You can't gain that power anymore. It all fades away. That's what happened to Devadatta. He got those powers, but because of his lack of virtue, his pride, his selfishness, it all faded away. So those powers are only for those who have virtue. It's one of those natural laws which is actually very helpful. You can't have the powers and be cruel and mean and selfish at the same time. That's wonderful. So they're safe. Those are the jhanas. Tomorrow I'll tell you how they're used for insight. But for the time being, I will leave it there. Now, are there any questions? I'm sorry there were no jokes, or very few jokes, because it's very hard to have a joke about jhana. It's just, too out of this world. But I would do say sometimes that I give a recruiting campaign. Years ago, I did a recruiting campaign for my monastery because we were looking for more monks. These days, we don't do any recruiting because we're too full. But I said it was saying just about the pleasures you get from being a monk. They say you don't get much money. Your salary is not all that good being a monk. But I said the retirement plan is out of this world. Literally. Okay, questions, yeah. You got a question, yeah? Thank you very much. You're so kind. Then go on. Okay, it's saying if your sila is not pure, no matter how hard you meditate, you can't get into jhanas. That's not quite true. It just makes it much, much harder. The more purified your sila is, the easier it is to get into jhanas. But there is a way. The way is, and I tell this to the people here, you have to have pretty good sila. But if it's not absolutely perfect, when your nimitta comes out, the reflection of the mind, it'll be a bit dirty. Or it'll be dull. It won't be just brilliant and pure. But, and this is a technique which I teach you, which is important because, you can actually get these jhanas without being such a pure, really, really, really pure person. In that nimitta, somewhere will be the most beautiful spot. In that, whether it's a disc or a screen, you look for the spot which is the brightest, which is the most pure and beautiful. There'll always be a wonderful place in there, which is like that. And that's where you focus, the most pure part. Leave aside the dirty parts or the rubbishy parts. Get the best part. As you focus, you actually go into that. That sort of expands and that becomes your real nimitta. And in the center of that is the most beautiful part. And it's one way of which I call like shining and beautifying your nimitta. Take the best of the best of the best. And if you can know how to do that, you've got a dull nimitta, you can get the center of it, which is beautiful. And you get the center of that, and get the center of that. That's how you do it. Yeah, got another question? So, my goodness. Yeah? When it's a question from the back, I can't hear it completely. Can someone relay that to me? Yeah. Okay. It's something to do with silver mind control, but I can't fully hear it from the back. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never done silver mind control because I did sort of Buddha mind control, as it were. But it's not really mind control, it's always mind letting go, so I'm not quite sure what state is similar to what. But I really can't answer that because it's beyond my knowledge. Oh, yeah. Okay. am I getting the question that you're saying that as you meditate to that stage, there's many other uses for it?